All right. Good. Good morning. Good afternoon, wherever you are. So this is a talk about future-proofing your programming career if you are currently a full-time Perl developer doing it for money. And personally, I've done some form of Perl programming virtually every day since I was 14, which isn't that far off 25 years. And I imagine that's not particularly unusual in this crowd. And in that time, I've been pretty lucky to be getting paid for writing Perl virtually every day since I was 18. And while I've taken the occasional year or two off to pursue other interests, it's not a huge stretch to say I've been full or part-time employed as a Perl developer for the last 20 years. So today, I'm still getting paid to write Perl, but I also work with recruitment market data, and I also run the only Perl-focused recruitment agency, which I've been doing for the last 7 years. Now, I feel like I'm somebody who loves Perl, and I think that's probably true of everybody here. And I've got access as well to a lot of recruitment data regarding the size of the Perl recruitment market. And it pains me to say what I think we already know, which is that the Perl programming market is shrinking fast, and that you should probably have a plan to deal with that if your primary income source is programming in Perl. So in this talk, I'm going to start up by backing up my claims about the market with a little bit of data. I'm going to talk through what I think your options are for responding to this. And honestly, I don't think we're going to have any time to do the brief tour through some of the other programming stacks, but maybe we will. I'd like to add as well, please don't shoot the messenger. Perl is obviously not dead and seems to be in no danger of dying, but the number of full-time Perl jobs is unambiguously in decline at the moment. So the first numbers here that we're going to look at, let me get rid of that. Is we're going to look at how the market is in trouble. And we're going to start off with some numbers from Broadbean Technology, who are accompanied with an extensive set of data on the wider job market. So the following numbers take all of the UK and US roles that mention in the title any of Perl, Python, Node.js, or Golang, and looks at how the number of those roles for each of these compares to the other. And sadly, what you can see here is that in 2015, 10% of all jobs that mentioned Perl, Python, Node.js, or Golang mentioned Perl, but by 2020, that had fallen to 1%. Node.js grew from 20 to 25% at that time, Python stayed around 70, and Golang climbed from 1 to 5% in the same time period. These numbers probably underestimate the number of Node.js jobs, as I'll search on that rather than JavaScript. So that's in relation to each other, but also in absolute numbers. For every 100 Perl jobs that got posted in 2015, there were 14 in 2020. Now obviously, 2020 was a pandemic year. I did a bit of work to try and kind of account for that. But the most I could, realistically fudge those numbers to account for it, we still end up with 18 jobs in 2020 for every 100 that we had. So either a seventh or a fifth of the numbers that we'd had in 2015. There's also publicly available job numbers on jobs.perl.org. And they publish the number of jobs that they've had every month since 2001. I don't think anybody's going to be particularly surprised to see that the number of jobs posted there has been decreasing since 2007. But really, how small the numbers are now getting is worth sitting up and taking notice of. And not only are the number of jobs shrinking, but the relative rate at which they're shrinking is increasing too. A market that had 341 jobs in 2015 can't afford to keep losing 60 jobs year on year. And that's exactly where we find ourselves in 2020. While 2020 again was a pandemic year, the numbers there are just a continuation of previous trends. 2021 is looking to be an ever so slightly better year than 2020, which is some comfort. But again, we'll be lucky in 2021 to see even 30% of 2015's numbers. And honestly, the final kind of data point here is some anecdotes from me. I personally work day in, day out with companies that hire Perl developers. A decreasing number of our customers are pure Perl places anymore. Most are writing at least some of their new services in Node.js, Python, or Golang. The technical managers and CTOs there get heavy pressure often from the commercial side of the business to upgrade their stack. And many of the companies that do still have pure Perl roles are maintaining and adding incremental features only to old code bases, rather than starting exciting new and greenfield projects. So given all of this, I think it's fair to say you need to start thinking about what a plan would look like. So three kind of general shapes of a plan here, the way I see it. If you want to keep working as a programmer and you're currently all in on Perl, you've got these three options. You can stick with Perl and hope for the best. You can retrain yourself and try and get a job using a new stack, or you can find a company that will pay you to retrain. I'm going to talk briefly about all of these. I'm going to highlight the downsides of concentrating and trying to find jobs that continue to be pure Perl. I'm also going to give you some specific strategies on executing a move, convincing a company to hire you as a senior developer in a stack that you don't have commercial experience with. And finally, I'm going to try and convince you that actually your best option is to get somebody to pay you to cross-train from Perl while still programming in Perl. All right, so let's start with the first of these possible plans, which is sticking with Perl forever. And I think, we all know the world has a lot of Perl-powered, valuable, money-generating code bases. And simply replacing working, battle-tested code that's doing a good job is rarely a pressing commercial priority. And it's rarely prioritized as well against delivering new features that pay customers want. Some pure Perl jobs are basically going to stick around forever. And there will be people who finish their careers in 20 to 30 years' time, having continued to primarily only program in Perl, continuing to nurse and just gradually improve programs that started their life in Perl, and nobody can justify the cost of rewriting. There are, after all, still a small number of COBOL programming jobs still out there. However, these may not be the jobs you want. I've worked on a number of commercial projects where the goal has been to kind of keep a Perl code base alive and ticking along, while the fun and exciting greenfield work is being done elsewhere. And it can be really disheartening to be on a legacy life support team while there are people around you doing exciting new things elsewhere in the business. And while your team and company might currently be all in on Perl, even the most committed Perl teams can get sideswiped by changing circumstances. So maybe the company gets a new CTO, or maybe it gets acquired by a competitor, and the Perl team and the code base are kind of seen as a legacy and holdouts, kept on life support. And if you're very lucky at this point, they pay to retrain you into whatever the company has decided is the new hotness, even if that's Java or C#. But honestly, just as likely, they end up making some of the team redundant. But listen, this is still a viable option. I have clients today in the US, the UK, and who hire remotely and are very interested in Perl, are very committed to staying with Perl, and don't believe they're going to switch to anything else soon. Tech and commercial leadership at these companies are sold on Perl, and that they'll most likely continue to use Perl for their systems indefinitely. Again, I think this is an inherently risky choice, though, to continue down that pure Perl path. Especially as the people at the top of companies do change through retirements, through buyouts, through natural just kind of attrition, and you might find somebody much less pro Perl in their place. Another possible opportunity here is retraining in your free time. I can remember as when I was a kid learning Perl, I read somebody else's account of having sat down and they reckoned they had read programming Perl from front to back and then just started churning out a bunch of software in Perl. And if you're able to do that, that's amazing. More power to you that I can't. And if you have all of the time and the motivation to spend the next X months using your weekends and evenings to learn a new programming language from scratch, again, more power to you. These days, I find it increasingly difficult to find large blocks of uninterrupted time, which I can dedicate the time and attention this would need. And I don't even have kids or a commute. However, if this is you and you can sit down and retrain yourself to use a new programming language in your free time, now would be a great time to investigate one with more of a kind of a buoyant job market than Perl. But one of the challenges you're going to face here is finding companies that will hire you at your current seniority without commercial experience in their stack. But there definitely are companies out there who will think of a senior developer in almost any language as being a senior developer regardless. So if you do choose a strategy, what can you do to maximize your chances of convincing somebody to hire you using a stack that you have no commercial experience of? So I spend a lot of time helping people sell the skills they have effectively. We get a lot of great developers come to us and send us absolutely terrible CVs. And I also spend a lot of time helping people with strong back-end experience in a different stack, plus a little bit of Node.js, sell themselves as Node.js developers. And so based on all of this, here are my tips. I think the key to trying to find work in a language that you don't have commercial experience of is to try and differentiate yourself from somebody who isn't particularly interested in the language, but just touched it once. It's kind of chancing their luck. You want to show that you're invested in and committed to the new language that you're trying to seek employment in. And I think one way to do this is to lean heavily into a language's USP or all the difficult concepts there and prove that you've already climbed that particular language's learning curve and that you've got a genuine interest in the language. So, for example, if somebody wanted to move into Perl, having strong backend somewhere else, and you do still find people like that, we advise them that they need to kind of lean into modern Perl. They need to get their heads very firmly around Moose and Moo. They pick up one of the big web frameworks, understand Plack. What they're trying to show here is that they're going to be wanting to show potential employers that they're more than just Java developer who wrote a few fire and forget Perl scripts once. And this is going to be the same with you moving into a role with new programming languages that you don't have commercial experience in. Let's say you wanted to move into a JavaScript role with Node.js. Your proof of interest and commitment is going to look something like having fully conquered promises, async await, gaining a deep understanding of the weirdness of how function and this works. But again, the key point here, and what's really going to help you out, is to try and show an interest and commitment in the language, so that you've mastered the unique selling points and warts of that language. Another great indicator that somebody is invested and is committed that employers will use here is their exposure to a stack's auxiliary tooling. And so for Perl, this is someone who's figured out how to get their CPAN packages packaged up the way they want, who's played around with a few different testing modules and can name and explain Perl brew and local libdo. If you want to sell yourself as being invested in and committed to a language, you're going to find this much easier if you can tell war stories about playing around with this kind of tooling. And one way that you're going to get that is through your open source contributions. So many of you here will already have a directory full of CPAN modules. And the great thing about these modules is that they represent problems that you already know how to solve, which means they're an absolutely great starting point for explorations into new programming stacks. Nobody's going to care if there's a better library already on NPM or in Golang packages that your ported library is just another implementation of. However, the process of porting that library, packaging it, testing it, documenting it, and so on, is going to expose you to many of the pieces of auxiliary tooling. And most importantly, if a potential employer looks at your GitHub profile, it's going to look a million times more impressive than having forks and learn Python repo. So finally, and pretty much last of all, picking up a decent effective X or X design patterns book and seeing if there's anything there you missed out. As an experienced developer in one stack already, and with a good basic understanding of a new stack, these are going to be absolute gold mines for you in understanding the whys of a language and picking up the arcana and the shibboleths needed to confidently talk about solving problems in that language when you're in an interview. But I think there is a better strategy still here. And this is my recommended strategy, which is getting somebody to pay for you to cross-train, right? I'm just going to take a quick look at the chat messages because there are a lot of them. Fine. Okay. Get somebody else to pay for you to cross-train while you still do some Perl. A good number of the Perl companies I work with are at least experimenting with building services in new languages while still having a lot of existing Perl that needs wrangling. And for many of them, a move away from Perl is a long-term strategic goal that they don't feel any particular need to rush towards because they've got a functioning team of strong Perl developers who they're happy with. Now, I've seen a couple of companies go through a process of starting off as a Perl shop and slowly moving stuff until they become something else. And the process generally looks a bit like this. There's some key points here. So the team starts off experimenting with a new language, or maybe with a couple. I'm going to use Python as an example because I enjoy saying it. Developers are, initially in stage one, developers are given more time to complete tickets in the new language, and the keenness of these developers are sort of blazing the way at the company, become a company Python expert. Now note, the company is still hiring Perl developers, and Perl is the main language you need to know, but the job ads start mentioning an interest in Python being a bonus. And after a while, you kind of move on to stage two, and you get, maybe one or two teams in the company writing their code exclusively in Python. And maybe the company pays for training at this point. Maybe they hire one or two experts in the language. Job ads make Python more prominent. Now, this is key. Again, note that at this point, the company is still 100% hiring Perl developers and willing to pay Perl developers for their experience with a view that these Perl developers will make the transition to Python in time. But once the die is cast, once you start to move on from there, the company shifts on to all new code being in Python. Most of the developers at this point have learned some Python from colleagues or from training or from just being given extra time to complete tickets in unfamiliar stack. At some point, new hires that they want go from being Perl developers to them just wanting back-end developers, but whom Python starts being crucial, Perl is a nice to have. And then that final stage is the complete metamorphosis, and the companies then become a Python shop. New hires of Python, and Perl skills are not especially well regarded anymore. If you don't already know Python, you're out of luck. I have seen this process happen at a number of our clients while we've worked with them. And if I'm lucky, they've moved to Node.js, where I can still provide them candidates. But if I'm not, they went in a different direction and they just no longer want Perl candidates. The best time to join is while they're still hiring Perl developers. The reason for this, if you join a company hiring Perl developers and you are a Perl developer, obviously you're going to get hired at a fitting seniority and salary as befits your Perl experience, which is probably what you want. And almost every year where you did do mostly Perl and some Python at a Perl shop that was becoming a Python shop is a year of commercial Python experience for your resume. Company moving from Perl to Python gradually will be looking to pay their employees to cross-train, and maybe that's real training, or maybe that's just giving them extra time to complete stuff. All of this time, you will still be able to write some Perl. The best time to make sure you have a job where you can cross-train on somebody else's dime from Perl was 2 to 3 years ago, but the second best time is now. We don't always get these nice transitions. This here is an example of how it goes right. However, we've also got examples where it goes wrong. And again, these are things, I see talking to tech management. Company gets acquired, or there's a new CTO who is very Perl hostile and wants something else instead. The Perl team gets made redundant. You are obviously much better off in a situation in a company that is slowly transitioning from one to the other and giving you the opportunity to cross-train at the same time. If you like where you are and you don't want to move and they're not introducing new languages, it's worth noting, in my experience, the biggest thing stopping tech management from even suggesting adding new languages can be this idea that their Perl team will riot if they do. I've talked to a couple of people at companies like this. This view seems to be quite widely shared. If you show some willingness to experiment, you're going to get potentially rewarded with paid training, paid days off messing around with cool new tech, and some significant corporate goodwill. So we've got a part 3 rambling about other languages, but honestly, we move there from things I am qualified to have an opinion. Oops, screen sharing has stopped. We move from things I'm qualified to have opinion about to just some thoughts. So in my last minute, I'm going to have a look and see if there's anything important there on chat. And if you have a burning question, throw something in there.
And everybody should be able to unmute, so if they want to just ask, that might be the easiest. About 5 minutes before I need to end.
Peter, I'll unmute. The situation I'm in is we've kind of, our company architecturally is kind of developed an anything but Perl stance, but they haven't. They've still just got this grab bag of things. They've just pointed us at a training site that has all these different languages and things and said go, and I don't mean the language. So given that, since every language, every architecture is its own rabbit hole, how do you choose?
I think for me personally, I would be looking at something that represents more of a platform than a given specific language. And I think really your options there are either something based on the JVM, which certainly I know I've got limited interest in, but then also something based on Node and on browsers. I think moving into something like Python, I think Python is going to have the same problems that Perl has in 10 to 15 years, whereas I think Node.js is currently adding features and this platform part of it, and the fact as well that you've got such an entrenched market in the browsers, I think is something really powerful. I'd also point out that if you can stomach it, Golang is a really useful accessory skill there. I hate Golang, but that doesn't mean it's bad from a career perspective. One thing you'll note about a lot of Golang jobs is that Golang is an add-in language there, and that they're looking for developers in another backend, and yet they will write some stuff in Golang there. And I think with a set of jobs like that, you having strong Golang skills is going to allow you to jump between them. Personally, I spent the last 6 weeks teaching myself Node.js, and I've been having the most incredible amount of fun with async await, with promises, with generators, with streams. I can also tell you that the market rate for Node.js developers in London is £20,000 to £30,000 higher than it is for senior Perl developers at the moment. I don't know about numbers outside of London, but I suspect that's pretty indicative there.
What's your opinion on Rust?
I love the idea of it. I'm not sure in terms of what I would use it for. I don't know. Something about Rust seems very Perlish to me. I don't know if anybody else kind of feels that way about it. It's a big language that does a lot of exciting stuff, and it seems to have these functional feelings. However, I can't. Yeah, that's just personal preference. I can't give you any market feelings on Rust.
I've been writing Rust for fun. I've looked at the Rust job market. It's pretty small, and a disturbingly large amount of it is cryptocurrency companies. I think it will grow over the next 5 or 10 years, but right now it's quite a bit smaller. I would agree with what you were saying, Peter, that Node, Go, those are like bigger and growing than Rust at the moment.
Yeah, I mean, I've honestly enjoyed Node much more than I thought I would. Having the ability to drop into TypeScript when you have a bit of code that you want the safety of typings with has been great. Again, the async stuff has been great fun. Now, I've done quite a bit of async stuff in Perl before with Mojo, but also there's a Mojo port to Node upcoming. So I'm pretty bullish on Node. I think that's probably coming through here. Dave, you had your former role. You all started introducing stuff written in Go, right?
Yeah. My last employer, we started off on Perl, and then we started writing Go. My current employer, I've written Perl just for like one-off scripts. All our services are in Go. Basically, we're using Go, Python, and then Elm on the front end, which is it's like Haskell for the web that compiles to JavaScript.
All right. Any more?
Any good recommendations that you would toss in for anyone looking into Node.js, for example?
Honestly, I think going to your own cpan directory, if you have one, and just trying to port stuff over is a great idea. I've been enjoying reading through Node.js design patterns, but honestly, this is something that I do, and I don't know if how much other people would enjoy doing it. is just trying to figure out how stuff works, especially if you've done some JavaScript before. Looking at the new ES6 features there, I had this base assumption that almost all developers know some JavaScript. And I think, yeah, I found the Node.js design patterns book starts off talking about what Node is in terms of it being a wrapper around an event library and multiplexing events and so on. So yeah, heavy recommendation for that book.
Okay, well, thank you for speaking, Peter.
As to Brett here, Rust and Go support real concurrency. I believe Node.js is just single-threaded. I believe it's single-threaded, but you can use a technology called workers to kind of to spread stuff out there. That's not something I know that much about.
Cool. Yeah, thank you. I was obviously something I'm interested in, but I haven't really played with Node.js much. But I've looked into Go more than Rust, but I do know that they're pretty powerful for multiprocessing.